Hey guys, welcome to another Hog webinar. Today we are going to be working with macros and merging show files, all that good stuff that's involved there. So Keystroke macros, Comet macros, merging show files, like what can be what can and can't be merged, when you probably want to merge show files, that kind of things. Paul, do you have anything to add before we jump into some show merging?
No, I'm looking forward to learning.
Awesome. Awesome. Here's some upcoming streams that we have. Bridging the Hog, so that's networking. And then help, how do I fix this the week after that for some troubleshooting tips and tricks from Paul and I. And hopefully it'll help you solve some issues that you run into. So now let's jump into some show merging. So with shows, you can actually merge shows together. And usually you want to do this when you're trying to combine cue lists or scenes or something else that exists in another show that you want in the show file that you're currently in. Sometimes though, it can help to merge just your old show file into a new show if you're running into like some corruption issues. So I'm gonna walk through how to merge a show into a blank new show file, and then we'll talk about some of the things that pop up as we merge in. New show is the best title for a show name. Usually you want to make sure you are giving your shows wonderfully actually labeled shows names. So to get to the show manager, because that's where you merge shows, you have to hit setup and then you click on shows at the bottom here. And in the current show tab, there's a merge show button. So when you hit merge show, it's going to say, hey, welcome to this wizard. We'll walk you through how to do it. You can only merge shows or libraries. So what doesn't get merged in is like network settings. So anything ArtNet, like your ArtNet output, ArtNet input, SACN, widget mappings, those kind of things won't be merged in. Your widget mappings might stay because that's a little bit different hardware wise, but like anything inside that DP8000 settings or console settings, those don't get, well, console settings should stay because they're console. But anything inside those DP8000 settings won't get merged over into the new show file or into the different show file. Always make sure you have a backup if you're going into an existing show of the show file pre-merge. That way, in case something goes wrong in the merge, you can always go back to what it was before merging your shows. So the first thing it asks for is your source location. So what show file has the information that you want to bring into the one that you're in? So I'm going to do that setting the scenes one. That way we can get all those scenes from the scene directory that were made and all that good stuff. So I'm going to hit setting the scenes and then hit next. And here now it's asking what type of fixtures we want to merge in. So if you just want all of the fixtures as they are, you could always just hit next and keep going. Or if you only want some of the fixtures, you can just click and then click inside the checkbox, and that'll for sure bring those fixtures into the show file. Since I already started, I'm just going to keep going. So if you only wanted some of your fixtures, you can only bring in those specific fixtures if you wanted to. Next, and then you have to actually say, do you want to append or do you want to replace the fixtures that are already there? So there's a couple caveats with this. So appending would be if you're adding in, you would probably want to append fixtures if you're adding in new fixtures inside your show file. So you already have in your show file, you already have Solo Spot 2000s, but now you're adding in your Wash 3000 or your Wash 2000s from a different show file. Well, you don't really want to replace, you just want to append those. Replace if you want to if you are trying to bring in a whole show file into like a brand new show file, my suggestion is to always hit replace. That way they don't accidentally get like numbering off. So throughout this throughout this wizard here, there will be a lot of replace or append options. My suggestion is to always hit replace when possible. Because there's no shows, and I mean no fixtures inside the show file, we're just gonna hit append. Now, if you wanted to bring in user kinds, you can do that here. And your user, so we can just hit next. We'll just say yes, we'll bring those in. And then we finally get to groups, and we'll start getting into more show objects. So some show objects, as you're merging in, are dependent on whether or not you're merging fixtures. So anything with groups, palettes, cue lists, scenes, batches, pages, and plots, all of those show objects, you must have selected fixtures to bring in into the show file, so to merge in. And then in here, you'll have the option to append or replace. We're going to hit replace. That way, replace automatically takes these numbers that you have here and just puts them there. There's also merge by name or merge by number. So if the group exists with the same name, then Hog will go and merge those two groups together. Same thing with palettes. You can either do append or merge by name or merge by number here. And it can ask you for all of the palettes that exist inside that original show file. You can also go in and deselect what palettes you don't want to bring over, or just hit deselect all or select all. And these buttons only work for the tab that you are currently in. Plots, we'll go ahead and bring over our plots as well. Again, we have append, replace. If you choose append, it's just going to add it to the end of the directory, so the next available number inside the directory. Now, once you start trying to merge in cue list and scenes, you do need to make sure that you have merged in the palettes. If you haven't merged in palettes, you won't be able to merge in your cue list and your scenes. And same options here, and you can select them or deselect them, up to you. And then batches as well will need fixtures. So if you're trying to merge in batches, you need fixtures, palettes, groups also, and then also the cue list and scenes have to be merged in. So there's some dependencies when you're merging. So if you get here and you're like, hey, merge batches is grayed out, well then that's probably because maybe you didn't merge in your groups. Maybe you didn't merge in the proper palettes, that kind of thing. So if you ever see one that's grayed out, then you need to go and check and make sure that those dependencies are actually being merged in. So we can see here that merge pages is grayed out because I did not, even though I don't have any batches to merge, the merge page function is looking to make sure that yes, I am merging in batches. So then I can actually merge in my my pages. Wow, that was just finding both of them. So when I check the box to merge pages, something that you might want to pay attention to, especially if you're a brand new show file, is you already have a page 1 made. So if you just choose append, these pages will start on page 2 instead of 1. So your page 1 does not have any cue list, scenes, batches, or anything on it right now. So your main page would then start on page 2, and you would have to hit next page to get to page 2. So then that's usually one of those ones that I choose replace for. That way, for sure, my page 1 will populate based on this merge show option. Then you have macros that you can append. So like if there's any keystroke macros that you've made, that's what this is asking. I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. And then you have merge views. That's also merging your views inside from your previous show to this show. And again, you have append or replace. Append is going to start after all of these all of these views that come with Hog. So group won't be view 1 anymore. It would be whatever the next available view is here. That's also another one that I always suggest. If you want it that way, I usually suggest hitting replace on. That way your view numbers stay the same from your source show file. And then merge report queries, that's honestly up to you guys. So if you do a report and you have queries in there, you can choose whether or not to bring those queries over. Now when I hit finish, it's going to go through. My operation's complete. And we can actually see that all my pages got in. We can see that my views got replaced up here with those views that I hit that with those views that I hit replace on. If I go into my fixture window, you can see that it brought over all of my patch also and all the fixtures that I had inside that original show file. So when you merge in fixtures, it's going to try to merge in the patch as well, unless there are conflicts in the source show file. So if I already had something in Universe 5 starting at channel 1, then I would then these RGB LEDs would end up not getting patched in. So they would look pretty much like the pixel map layer. They would get merged in, and and if we merged in palettes, cue lists, scenes, batches, all their programming would get merged in. It just wouldn't be, those fixtures just wouldn't be patched anymore. And that's really the basics of merging your show file in. Do we have any questions before I go into a little bit more kind of showing some other gotchas with merging?
Can you use more than one show to merge from?
Not at the same time. So you would just have to repeat the process over again. So if I wanted merge show next. So like Paul and I were working with a dotted notation fixture earlier. So like if I wanted to bring those fixtures in that scheme, dotted number scheme that I already had into the show file, I can hit dotted. I can go ahead and do that even though I've already done one show merge. So you just have to repeat the merge process over again. But yes, you can merge more than one show file into the show that you have open. All right. Cool. So that's kind of like the gotchas with, that's kind of how the show merging works. Now, now to bring in certain objects, so there are some objects that don't have any dependencies whatsoever in them. I'm going to choose base right now. Base is the one that has all of these wonderful fixtures in here. I don't want base. Actually, let's do fixture builder.
Hey, Megan.
Yeah, yes.
If you want to merge, if I want to merge in an existing show, if I want to merge in an existing list from an older show, and the fixture types but not the fixture numbers have changed, will the programming utilize the new fixture types?
Ooh. If you are merging in an
existing list from an older show and fixture types, the fixture types but not the numbers have changed. I would assume, assuming like you did a change type.
I think that it would still reference that original fixture.
Merging a list. Well, you'd have to merge in the fixtures in order to be able to merge in a list, right?
Yeah. So
in the priority of things, in the kind of hierarchy of merging, in order to merge a list, it's going to be based on merging fixtures.
Yeah, that is completely correct. So you can't just merge in a list without fixtures. Like we actually won't even let you do that. So if I go into merge show, I'll go ahead and choose that one again. So without fixtures, you can't merge in groups, you can't merge in palettes, you can't merge in plots, cue lists, or scenes, or batches. So without fixture, so in order to even get that cue list in, you have to get that fixture, you have to merge those fixture types inside your show file. Then you could then you could copy your programming over to another fixture type if you needed to.
Or do a change type.
And then, but you can't have two fixtures be the same user number. And I don't think you can have.
But let's see, it's the follow-up question to that, but they will have the same fixture numbers as the ones in the newer show.
So you can have multiple fixture types with the same user number.
They'll just have the asterisks.
Yeah, so I can have these to be 501 if I wanted to. So that new cue list that you merged in with those new to this show fixture type, it is going to that cue list will work with those fixtures that you merged in as well. It won't reference your original fixtures inside your show file, inside your show file that you opened. So like even though I changed my pixel map layer numbers to be 501 through 505, if I have 501 through 504 referenced here in any cue list, but they're referencing to the dimmers, it's not going to affect my pixel map layers because they're two different fixtures.
Right, so the cue lists are referencing the fixture types.
Yes, exactly. I don't think I can patch, so 508 at 395. Yeah, that gives me an error. So you can't have two separate fixtures at two addresses. And then I don't think, yeah, and you cannot have two user numbers be the same. Two of the same type fixtures cannot be the same user number, but you can have different fixture types be the same user number if you wanted to.
Cool. Sorry. I think we're caught up.
No, it's okay. That is totally fine. We are here for questions. And that kind of showed what I was going to say. We are.
So how would I do that? I need to bring in a cue list from an older show file of this older version of the same show file, but different fixtures. But I think I don't know. How would I do that? I need to bring in a cue list from an older version of the same show with different fixture types. I mean, I still think you're merging fixtures and cue lists, and then you're doing a change type.
Yeah, I mean,
if I'm understanding this question correctly, I think that's your process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you'll need to merge in to get that cue list in. You'll need to merge in those fixtures, and you'll need to merge in those palettes. Then you can get that cue list in, and that cue list is referencing those fixtures and those palettes. Now, once you need that different, I bet what's happening is that cue list is referencing. You want that cue list to work with fixtures that are already inside the show file. And in that case, you're just going to have to do some hardcore copying. Like, so you could do, let me get the visualizer going real quick. One through 9 at full. Tilt them down stage. Now, if I wanted this so imagine this is like a cue list, and my next the cue list that I merged in had it in my solo wash, and I now need it to apply to my solo wash 2000s. You could do 1 through 9, copy to 201 through enter, and now, or whatever my 201s are. So now my information has been copied over. So I wonder if, either somehow there's going to have to be some way of you copying that information to the fixtures that you're currently inside your show file.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be, there is not a, here, hit this button, here, hit this button, and now it applies to those fixtures.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Is there, when you're starting your merge and select fixtures, are you able to select individual fixture types to merge?
You can, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Once you select merge fixtures, you can select which fixture types.
So like if we just wanted to bring in this like bar self or we want to bring in this user created solar frame 1000 and we don't want any of the other fixtures, then you just hit the checkbox for the one you want and you hit next. And then when you merge fixtures, it'll allow you to merge them in. And it'll only merge in that one fixture type. It won't merge in all the other fixtures inside your show file.
Bud follow-up statement. Well, I could go the copy route, but I have songs with 100+ cues. And I think that's why I might revert back to what I was originally saying. You're going to have to merge the fixtures to get the cue list and then do a change type. Again, if I'm understanding what you're trying to achieve.
That would work, but that doesn't apply to the fixtures that are already inside his show file.
It's true.
So like we have Solo Spot 2000s here right now in new show, but now we're bringing in setting the scenes show with the Solo Spot 2000s that I want to change type.
Could you replicate the fixtures that you have and then change type for the replicated fixtures?
I think there's still something we're missing in there though. Like there's not an easy. I don't think there's an easy button for this.
This is not an easy button for this.
I guess it's a better way I would say is what I would say more so. Is that there is not an what you could do, Bud, and believe me, I've been there, where I have had to and mainly it's in the demo room. There's a show file with 6,000 cues written to a prototype fixture library. The new fixture library does not match, or the release fixture library does not match the prototype library whatsoever. So I can't even do a change type from one to the other. What you can do is make your life easier with some keystroke macros though. That way it's just a one button push instead of you have to select all the fixtures and then hit update. And keep doing that, and that's a perfect use case for keystroke macros. Again, it still takes a bit of work on your end, but it's not. But you can kind of just set up the keystroke macro to where it's going to save you, and it's going to save you some time in the long run. Unless someone else has a easy button for that.
I have an easy button. Just tell the production company we're only using these fixtures and we're not changing. I'm kidding. That's a terrible joke.
I'm sorry, that cue list no longer exists. It somehow got deleted from the console. Okay. Hopefully that helps a little bit with that question. I know, and unfortunately there's just not, I don't think there's an easy button that you're looking for, Bud.
Paul, you tried doing shows in 72 countries and getting specific fixture types. That's why I said it was a bad joke. I promised I winked and smiled.
Excuse me. Great. So let's see. One other thing I want to make sure before I say this. But I don't know if I had command keys in that other show file. So let's go ahead and actually move a command key. One move here. Great. And we are going to log off this show file. And we're going to launch a whole new one, and then we're going to merge this show file. The show file that we just logged off into a brand new one.
David Peck says, Paul will be willing to sell fixtures in 72 countries.
I'm down for that.
It's true.
Oh, I just launched the same show file. Sorry if there are distant cat screamings in the background. I promise the cat is okay. No cat is harmed during this. It's just She is upset that the door is closed. All right, so we're launching a new show file. We're going to merge that show file in because I don't think that commands get carried over, but I want to make sure. So we selected our source show file. I like to be safe and just check the boxes. This is the same way that if you wanted to just bring in a very specific type, this is how you would bring it in. You would just say, great, you would just only check in the unos, and that would only bring in the unos in this show file. We're going to say merge fixtures. Now, if you notice, if I uncheck merge fixtures, then I don't get the option to bring in groups, palettes, plots, cue lists, scenes, batches, pages, but you do get the options for macros and for views. So if you just needed to bring in macros or views from a previous show file, you can do that without merging in fixtures. Like you don't need fixtures or cue lists or groups or scenes, anything like that, to actually bring in your views or bring in some keystroke macros. Merge fixtures now. Next, user kinds, groups, palettes, plots, scenes, batches, pages. Yeah, so, and then also, as I suspected correctly, your command keys do not get merged over. So if you have anything in commands, those will not, anything in your command directory, so anything inside this window will not get merged over to the new show file. So you'll need to make sure that you know what's there if you want your command keys set up correctly. Now, if you selected everything to be merged in, all those objects that were on your command keys should still be in the show file. As long as through the wizard you selected, yes, I want to merge in the fixtures, the palettes, the groups, the cue lists, the views, all of that should exist in your show file, and you can move all of that to your command keys just as they were before. And just to throw this, I know this is Hog 4 specific. I know the webinars for Hog 4, but if you're on a Hog 3 and you're trying to get in a fixture profile, or you're on an older version of Hog 4 and you're trying to get a custom built fixture out of your show file, this is the way to do it. You would have to merge your show file in, select the show with the custom fixture. And then select the fixture type that you want to merge in. Once you have that fixture type selected, and you've hit merge fixtures and replace, it'll get added to this show file for you to use. And so that's just a really small tidbit for older Hog 4 versions and for Hog 3. It does still work for Hog 4, like current Hog 4 versions, to merge in that way, but you can also just export fixtures from your fixture builder if you need to as well, like export the actual fixture library instead of having to merge it in. Any other questions about show merging? I know it's fun and exciting.
I think we're doing okay.
Great. I'm making sure my visualizer works, buying some time to ask more questions if they come in. Merging also won't bring in your preferences or your control or your preferences options. So if you needed to get your preferences from one show file to another, there's a handy dandy import and export button here. So you could always, once you have your preferences set up exactly how you want them, you can always export them, give them whatever name you want, and then you can import them into that new show file or into that different show file. So that's also useful. And if you're just merging to get a patch with fixtures that are just built into the library, what you can do is instead of having to merge, there's an import patch and export patch button. So you can actually export your patch, and then just re-import that patch into a new show if you needed to. So there's a couple of different ways to get certain things without having to actually merge your show exactly. So again, if you needed just the patch, then you can do that via the import patch, export patch. If you needed your preferences, which doesn't get carried over in your show merge, then you can import and export those preferences. But like I said, so your DP 8000 settings generally won't be carried over into a new show. I think we hold over the DMX widget mappings, but that's just because it's console wide. So just be aware of that, unless they've been changed. So be aware that if you're merging into a new show file, your network settings might not carry over correctly. That's why we all have cameras in our pockets now to take pictures and reference later. How many? Okay, so I'm going to go and rearrange this view. How many fixture? 10 across, I think. Yeah. Cool. I am getting ready to do macro things then. So while that's happening, if there's other questions with merging, it'll work. Feel free. All right, so since all these questions came in, let's go ahead and just jump into macros. So Hog has two different concepts of macros. There's Keystroke macros and there's Comet macros. I think by this time I have talked a lot about about Comet macros. Comet macros get fired. There's a set of Comet macros. They generally get fired when you go a queue or you go a scene. There are cases like if pages that you can actually get you can Comet macro. So when you change a page, you go a certain queue list, bring faders up, all that good stuff. So underneath this macro column, these are your Comet macros that exist in the console. So you can go a master, fade masters, release them, go queue lists, scenes, batches, all that good stuff, and release them, assert them, halt them, change pages, recall views, enable, disable timecode, open the timecode toolbar if you want to, output MIDI strings if you want, and output MIDI notes. So if you make a MIDI note in the MIDI note window, that'll appear here inside this macro for you to choose. Enable your clocks. So basically a lot of functionality on the console. That way you don't have to actually physically do it yourself every time you go this specific queue. Same with macro. So, and then you can also fire keystroke macros from your lists or your scenes if you wanted to also, which is what this go macro, halt macro, and release macros are. So those are to fire keystroke macros. And where keystroke macros are different is that they are made by the user and or made by you guys. And so when you make keystroke macros, it's recording every single button push that you push. And then when you play it back, it plays it. If you don't adjust it at all, it plays it back in that real time. And it is acting exactly like if you yourself were pushing those buttons. You just hit the one button to make it fire. So Comet macros are great. Keystroke macros can help your programming go a bit further if you can't achieve what you want out of your Comet macros. So let's get this back here. So let's talk about recording some keystroke macros. So one of the keystroke macros that's really common that I always see or always hear about is the pixel mapping, which we kind of briefly touched on, I believe, in the pixel mapping episode or pixel mapping webinar. but we'll actually go ahead and make it now, and some do's and don'ts with Keystroke Macros. Groups. So I'm going to go ahead and open my group directory, and I know I have plots here. So something that you really want to make sure of when you're recording keystroke macros is, especially if you know you're going from console to console, so you're going from like a full bore to a Roadhog to a Hedgehog, or you might even be on Hog 4 PC. You want to make sure that the buttons you're pushing in the macro are not actually like screen presses. And what I mean by screen presses is when you like press to select a group, that is a screen press. Because this button placement might change based on what console you're on. So if you're on a Hog 418, this is going to be at a different location than it is currently on my Hog 4 PC. So whenever you're recording keystroke macros, it's best to do as much as you can from the front panel rather than pressing on the touchscreen. So to record a keystroke macro, we're going to hit record macro, and then you select what macro you want it to go in. We'll just say macro 1 for now. And once this red light starts blinking, we are now recording that macro. So to record a macro that applies the pixel map layer in the plot, we got to select the fixtures first. So I'm just going to do it via the group directory. So group 41, enter, and then you apply the plot. So pig fixture puts plot in the command line, and then I say what plot number it is. So 1, enter. So now the fixture's intensity and color has been mapped to that plot. And then we select the pixel map layer at full. So group 50 at full. And then we can open up that media picker, pig open beam. And then we can be done recording the macro. So pig macro is going to stop the recording. And you can tell that it stopped because it's no longer flashing red. So now whenever I click on media content, we know it's working. Great. So the only issue now, though, is if I fire that macro, so I hit macro 1, enter, it's going to 1, recall the view, which might not be necessary. And 2, it's going because it's green here, and you can see it's green on my status line. And 2, it's running in real time. So that entire time that I've been talking and I was explaining what I was doing is all factored into these macro steps. And you can see on the command line that it is currently firing exactly what I said. It's just going to take a really long time. Plot 1, RGB LEDs. It's going to now do the group for group 50 for the pixel map layer at full, and then it's going to open my my media picker, and we're done. And the green is gone. So that was a really long time. So now it's like, well, what's the point if it's going to go that long? So usually the next thing you're going to do is you're going to open that macro to adjust the timing. So we can actually shorten that timing up quite a bit. So I'm going to hold down open, get that macro directory open, and then open up that macro. So in here, we have the number, your wait time, your name, the command, so what button you're pressing, or what exactly is that step doing. And if there needs to be command data, that gets thrown in there. And then how long, and then the duration. So like how long is that command actually going to take? So it took me 14 seconds to explain what exactly I was doing here. So that's why it's taking a really long time. What you always want to make sure is that your wait time for this command, for this step, is always longer than the duration. So if I want to shorten this up, my clear command really doesn't take any duration, it says. So for those, I'm going to just say set, click and drag, hit set, 0.01, just to make them really quick. And you always want to make sure it's 0.01 faster or 0.02 to be safe faster than your duration. And it's always the step before it. So right now we have 0.7 as our duration. So we want to make sure that this one is 0.08, for example. And then you just keep going. So this one we'd want to be is 0.07. Step 6 is 0.06. And I like to just go 0.01 more. That way the console or the computer has more than it has enough time to actually process what needs to happen at that point. Point 0.06. So here's where things also get tricky though, is because if you we had to hold down pig and then fixture. So it's pig, fixture, and then you let go. And then you get one, so that's 52 second, 0.52 seconds. So we just, I mean, we can just keep going. So the wait time, like I was doing, hold down pig, that should take, it's a fun figuring this out, 0.53, and you could just keep going down like that, or you can also just do it all at once. And at this point, I usually just take it, since the highest one in this is 0.06, I'll go 0.07. Yes, it's a little bit longer than it necessarily needs to be, but it makes it a bit, but it's still a lot faster than me actually doing it myself. So now if I pig release, let's do macro 1, enter, and it's selecting everything. And now that was way faster. So by adjusting your wait times on your macros, you can actually make things go a lot faster than you pushing the buttons yourself. Cool. So if we open up that macro again, double tap macro, open. This first step is recall view, which is why whenever even though my windows are closed, every time I hit macro 1, enter, it's always going to bring up the group directory and the plots. That way, if you had something that was dependent on the view that you were looking at, so a bunch of screen presses, that kind of thing, it can automatically open up those windows for you. But in this case, because I didn't do anything that was dependent on screen presses and those directories actually being open, we can get rid of macro 1. I mean, of step 1 in macro 1. So I can click on, to delete a macro step, you just click on that step, and then you hit delete, and it's going to say, hey, are you sure you want to delete it? And you say, okay. And now it's gone. So the first 2 steps are your recall view, and the next one is always clear command line. If you're doing anything command line heavy, usually you want to keep this step. That way your syntax isn't wrong because there was something accidentally in there, like you hit the color kind key and colors in there. Well, if you hit color group 41, enter, that might not be valid syntax. So clearing that command line as that second step is actually good so that you can get a clear command line if you need to. So now if I hit macro 1, enter, it should go again. And there it is. And now we have the macro, the views didn't open up. So now we could have even so inside this cue list that we have going here, I have my faders up like they need to be. But now if I go macro 1, enter, I can now get my pixel mapping to open right up there and start pixel mapping right behind it. Macros can be moved to your command keys if you needed to. So instead of having to always hit macro 1, enter, maybe having macro 1 being on a command key, we can just tap is a little bit quicker. So to move a macro to the command key, you hit macro 1, move, and then tap the command key, just like with any other object. And now anytime you want to fire the macro, you just hit it. It tells you currently what step you're on, and then you're good. And you can use it just from there.
Can you make the duration time change to 0.01 to speed things up?
You might be able to. And then I could change all of these. 0.01, insert 0.02, clear. It looks like, yes, if you change that duration, it looks like you can change that duration time to be a lot quicker. And then you can speed things up a lot faster also. Yeah. So if you really need to speed things up, yes, you can change your duration time to be 0.01. In my applications that I've used macros, usually changing the duration time doesn't adjust it that much, but you did see that it made it quite a bit faster, because then I could change these wait times to be a lot slower also. What also might be useful so that's just a really common macro that I always see. You can quickly name things from your command keys if you need to, holding down set, clicking on that command key. So I'm going to say PM just for pixel mapping.
Leggy brought up a good point. On a Roadhog and a Hedgehog, you need the wait time to be no faster than 0.05 seconds. On a full bore or hog 4, it can be 0.03.
Oh, that is a good point because of processing power in the motherboards.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Leggy. You are like the master at macros, so that's great to know also. But yeah, so that's also something to be aware is if your macros aren't firing correctly, make sure that your wait times or you might have to adjust your wait times to be a little bit slower, just because the processing power might not keep up with everything that you're trying to do with it. So to be safe, the fastest wait time, I would say to be safe, especially if you don't know if these macros are going to go from a 418 to a hedgehog, you could change your wait times to be 0.05, and they should still look pretty fast. Yep. And I'm about to go over what Leggy also just said. So one thing that might be useful is, and why I usually just leave the durations, is your macro, you might want to actually have a macro that changes if you are selecting the evens or the odds, or you're inverting your fixture selection really quickly. So to record a macro, we'll record one that does the evens and odds. So I'm going to record a macro, and all it's going to do, record macro 2, enter, is it's going to hit select and then even. And then we're going to hold down pig, hit macro, and end the macro. And then we're going to record the next macro. So record macro 3, enter, same thing, select, but then odd. And then pig macro to end. So something to be careful of when you're changing your wait times and your durations is if your macro has to wait for either a tooltip or a toolbar to change. So not macro to enter. It did not record steps. Hold on. Replace. Select. Even. Pig. Macro. Okay, so if you're trying to get that bottom toolbar, you can actually add steps into the queue. And so inside the macros, we actually give you the option once there's a command there to change what you're doing exactly. So we can do a key press if you wanted to. And then you can say, what do you need there? So there's a Softkey button, lower left, lower right, those kind of things. So you can actually go and specify what Softkey to hit on that specific step. And you'll want to make sure your duration's right though on that, because then you have to wait for it to actually change at the very bottom from select to whatever you're trying to actually select. So Softkeys, what is that one? Select is Softkey lower right one, I believe will do it. So point, I'm just gonna go with 0.5. And that might still also be too long. Too short. Select 4 over 1, 2, 3, 4. So Softkey lower right 4, I believe. So we can do macro to enter. Yeah, so it was able to toggle, but of course I didn't have fixture selected. Programmer, groups. So I have all of my RGB LEDs in. I now hit macro to enter. Macro to enter. It was able to do select and then my evens at that point. So you'll just want to make sure that your wait time is not shorter than the time needed for it to actually change from select to your selection toolbar. Same if you're trying to do anything with like the record button, or you're trying to like select a specific kind mask. This could all, I actually don't know if that part could be macroed, but the part to actually get over and tap these buttons can all be macroed for sure. So if you are having issues or like your macro was just recorded blank, which is like what happened here in macro 3 also, you can always go in and actually specify what exact command do you want. So again, it would be a key press, soft keys, and then you just count down here how many soft keys you have. And you'll just count and you'll be able to choose the soft keys based on that. And then you can also go and specify exactly for the programming keys also. Like if for some reason you hit the wrong button while you're recording your macro, you can go and actually change what that button is without having to re-record your whole macro.
Yeah, he also mentioned to be careful to wait for a toolbar to appear for the soft button. Mm-hmm. This is, yep. in mention with the wait times.
Yeah.
Paul had a question. If you need to add a step into a macro, how to?
Yeah. So if you need to add a step, then you have to just record that macro. So you hit record macro. So you'll want to record over the macro that you have. And then there's an option that says add steps. So now it's just adding whatever steps I have here. Great. So it's just doing all of these key presses, which is nothing really. Pig macro. Now I can do open that macro, and you'll see apparently nothing is coming in. Well, 1 second. Record macro 3. I'm gonna hit add steps. So I'll just push buttons on my front panel because I know those work. Cool. So I just hit all those buttons, pig, macro. And now we have all of those buttons that I just hit in here. So now you have all of those steps have now been added. And I believe you can move them around the same way you hit move, and I could say to 5.5. Nope, lied. So you can't move steps around. So you can delete steps, so you can't move steps around. Try double clicking and changing. Thank you guys. And then if we open it back up. So if you're trying to move steps around, you have to double click. I knew there was a way. Paul and I also briefly talked about this. Like if you don't use a feature, you lose the feature. Like, so like I knew there was a way. So if you just click on the cell, hit set, you can type in the new number that you want it to be, the new step number. And that's going to not move it right away, but if you close the window and then reopen the window, it'll now be moved in the proper order. So that's just something else to be aware of. Is even though you can move it, even though you don't actually see it move in place. So I can click on the number, hit set, type it in, like I'm missing a 5 now. Even though it's not moved, as soon as we open it back up, it gets moved right into place where it needs to be. So now you can move stuff. You can move those macro steps around if you needed to. So again, to add steps, you just go to record that macro again, and it pops up this you would just want to record that same macro number, and it pops up this menu that says insert, add steps, or replace. Insert is going to give you like a macro 2.5. Add steps is going to be what allows you to actually add additional steps to the macro. And then replace is going to completely take out everything from that macro and replace it with the new steps that you're pushing. Yeah. Let's see, can you use a point number to insert steps higher in the macro? So like I want 11, like step 11 to go to 3.5. I think so. Oh, I think I hit the wrong 3.5. Yeah, so now we're at step 3.5.
He said, I mean, add a step at the end, then use a point number to move it higher.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So here, I'll try it again. I'll just record macro 3, enter, add steps, choose 8, pig macro 3, open. So now if I insert, and I want that to be actually step 1.5, it says it goes to step 1.5. If I, yeah, looks like it fired chosen master 8 in the proper place. So instead of being able to just move and hit the copy buttons like we're used to in queues and queue lists, you can just click on the cell, hit set, or double click on the cell, and it'll pop up with this little tooltip bar that you can then type in the proper step number that you want it to be. We've all learned something today. Cool.
Yay, learning together.
Yeah. So something to be careful of when you're recording macros, because I had to do this for SACN priority changes. This was very unique to the ETC Orlando demo room, where they wanted to be able to control it with EOS and with Hog. So like you just hit whichever console you're on, you hit the button and it takes control for that console. So like if they're on EOS, they'll hit the button and it changes the SACN priority. On the EOS, if you hit the button on Hog, it changes the SACN priority on Hog. The thing to be careful of when you're recording those type of things is that is one of the use cases that I probably want is figure out exactly where you want your macro to start recording. So for me, that was a use case of I wanted that recall view step. So I would hit record macro at this point. 4 is fine. And then you can start clicking where you need that macro to be and start doing those screen presses. And then you would go to SACN. Make sure they're enabled. I probably should have done this beforehand. But the next thing you also need to make sure of is that this window actually has focus. So you might want to double click or triple click a couple times or triple tap a couple times inside this pop-up window, because sometimes these pop-up windows don't necessarily tell the console, hey, I have focus here yet. So then you can go and you can type in the priority if you need to. And now that this has been done, it's been applied, okay, I can close the window and pig macro, and now the macro is done recording. And we can actually see, for some reason, it's not picking up my mouse clicks. So any of my key presses are not actually being, any of my mouse presses are not actually being recorded. I'm guessing that's just an issue with PC right now. It might be that WebEx actually has control over my mouse, so that's not coming through completely. But you'll want to make sure, so just be aware those pop-up windows like the SACN priority window, when you that you might need to double click if it doesn't work immediately, like double tap inside there to gain the console focus. Exactly. And then if you need to, if you've accidentally recorded a couple extra steps that you don't need, you can actually delete steps if you need to from the macro, which we already kind of went over. So we could delete recall view is not one that I would want to delete, but like I have 151050. We could go in and delete step 9, which is like a 1, and just delete it from the middle there, and it'll go away. 11, I think we need plus. Yep, and then you can do multiple at the same time if you use the plus button, and they'll go away as well. And again, it's just going to record everything that you're doing in real time, so you'll probably want to go and adjust that to be a little bit quicker as well. Cool. Those are some of the macros that I always see. Like I said, there's something going on. These examples all worked before I was in WebEx, so I think it's kind of like a WebEx thing that's happening that's not letting me get my keystrokes correctly. Something else that I do want to show with macros though is sometimes people want user input on the macro. So like being able to select a fixture and then or like updating a queue, but you need to say, or sorry, merging into a queue, but you need to say the queue number itself. So what you can do here, if you're trying to, so like this is a case, I've done this a couple times where we needed to do, it was in the demo room, like I was saying earlier, with new prototype fixture library to a new fixture library. Well, I wanted to say what queue to open. It opened that queue, bring up the fixtures, do all the copy stuff, and then it just kind of stops. And then once it stops, I can hit update. And then once it stops, I check. And then if I hit the button again, it continues and it opens, and then it waits for the next queue's input. And then it can continue going. So what we can do there is when you're recording macros, after you're done recording macros, if you delete a wait time, kind of just like if you delete a wait time on a queue list, once there's no wait time, the macro just stops and it waits until you tell it to go again, exactly like a queue list with no wait time. So once you hit that go button again on the macro, then it'll pick up where you had left off. So let me get into a queue list real quick, and I can kind of show that because words are a little bit different there. I think there is a queue list here. Let's step through this real quick. Play controls, play. Cool. So let's say inside these queues, I'm going to do Q4 open list 10 queue. So I'm going to start recording my macro now, so that it's going to record the list number, the queue number that I want open, and then we're going to copy these to the 201 numbers, and then we'll stop and we'll update there. So it's record macro enter. So it's just going to record to the next available macro. So list 10 Q1 open. And then I'm going to say 1 through 9 copy to 201 through enter. Turn off blind so we can see it. And then update. Pig macro. Okay, so basically all that's going to do, it's going to specify list 10Q, and we're going to have it wait for my input. And then before hitting, and then it'll stop. We're going to have it stop right after that. So in macro 3, we can open this guy up. We're going to make these speed up a bit first. 0.10 is what I'm going to go with. And then this number here is not what we need. We can actually delete the step here. Great. And then get rid of the wait time here. So it doesn't automatically follow. It's just going to wait. And then we will get rid of the wait time here. That way the update button doesn't get hit until I push the macro again. And then I'm going to move the macro to my command key, macro 3, move, tap. So now if I go the macro, it waits for me to actually input. So we can see on the command line, it says list 10Q. So I'll say 2, and then I can tap on that macro again, and it opens up the queue exactly like I wanted to, turns off blind, waits for me to actually say it's good. And then I hit the macro button again, and it should update. So then we can run it again. List 10Q, I specify 3, hit the button. Great, that looks good. And it's been updated. We can run it again. It's waiting. 4, hit macro. Looks good. Update. So all we did there was inside the macro, we deleted the step that would give you the 1. So instead of Q1, we just deleted that step that gives you the 1, left out a wait time so that the macro is still technically in a going state because we saw it was blinking green there on our command key. And then it waits till I hit go again on that macro to actually fire the rest of the macro. So this is, like I was saying with Bud, there's a way to make it a bit quicker if you're trying to copy one fixture programming type to another. And then it can wait for your input to actually figure out what queue you want to open inside that queue list. That was the last trick that I really wanted to show you guys with macros. So if you guys have any questions about what just happened there, or any questions over what we did at all in this webinar, I am open for questions.
Yay, questions.
I
wanted to Leggy add when we were talking about inserting the steps. He said that could have saved me hours of my life. Smiling.
It'll save you hours from here on out, though.
Paul, in macro and merge shows, if you have a list of MIDI notes mapped to macros, will that import?
That will not. I don't think it'll import because we don't ask you to import any of that stuff. But we can try. So like in MIDI note input, is that what you're talking about? Where you can go in here, hit Comet Macros, settings, choose, and say, great, that asserts master 12. I'm almost I don't think it does, but
yeah, that's what he's asking. Yeah, I don't.
Okay. Logging off. What's great is I don't think it does, but we can definitely go and try. New show.
Thanks, Leggy. Talk to you soon, buddy. Hope you're doing well. You had to
Let me
go.
go. Oh, okay, bye, Leggy. Thanks for dropping by. Okay, so it definitely wasn't held over in the console settings, and I don't think it'll be merged over in a show setting then. Setup shows in a show merge. I don't think this gets merged over. I think this is a new show 2 I was in. Because it's not something that we get asked to do. So many clicks. Finish. Network, console. Yeah, so anything inside this network window doesn't get merged over. What you could do to make your life a little bit easier, it depends on what type of Comet macro you're doing. But what you're doing is, what you can do to make your life just a tad bit easier if you're trying to chain a bunch of Comet macros together, like a recall a view, go this queue list, release this queue list, enable timecode, disable timecode. You could put those type of things inside just one scene and then merge that scene in, I think would work. And then you can just go back and say, great, this I'm going to go scene. I'm not, yeah, either scene or queue list or whatever. Go scene, whatever scene number that is for that macro, that's going to fire all those other Comet macros. Instead of having to retype all the macro chains over again. So that could help mitigate a little bit of the time taken to do that. If you're doing a lot of like with MIDI, I know with like MIDI buttons, like you can send out specific excuse me, sorry. You can send out specific notes and velocities to get certain buttons. Button colors. At that point, you would probably want to just make a backup of your show file at that point. And then anytime you're trying to you're starting a new show file, you can launch from that backup instead of launching from a new blank show file.
Do you see in the macro view, what does follow macro mean?
So I believe it is like follow list. I have macros open. There's a follow macro. So with follow macro on, so kind of like, I think it's like follow queue, where once you get like so many macro steps, and if this window is open, it'll follow what macro step you're on. So that's macro 1. Enter. Yeah, so it just follows your macro step, just like follow queue does inside the queue list window. Follow macro follows your macro step. So now if I have macro 1, if I have follow step macro turned off, notice that it stays scrolled at the very top and never scrolls to the bottom. So with follow macro turned on, it follows your steps all the way through.
Nice.
Yeah. Cool. What other questions? I feel like a lot of people ask questions about macros. Do you have a list of basic programming macros that are useful to have? I don't have a list necessarily, and it depends a little bit on the show. I know a lot of people.
Yeah,
It's difficult to say, but I know a lot of people like to fill up like select all, select evens, odds, invert here with these keys at the very bottom that I kind of showed with that select even option here. They also like to put segments here as well. So like to quickly get, depending of course on how your fixtures are laid out, to quickly get segments of 2 or quickly toggle on and off buddy parts if you needed to, or next by segment. Those are also pretty common to have. So like changing your segment options, your buddy options, and then these selection toolbars at the bottom are useful. There's definitely also like if you do that color picker thing in here and like your scenes where you can just Oh, it's going to be great because I don't have intensities up. Where you can click here and you get those different colors. There's ways you can write macros to where you can, so when you hit the macro, it's going to apply a left to right fan of the color appearing or right to left fan of the color appearing. Jonathan Armstrong or Leggy actually did a really good tutorial about this, and I think it may be on our YouTube page. If not, it's
I think
in the
it's on the
Facebook
Whole
group.
Hog 4 group, Facebook group.
It's for sure in the Facebook group, and I think he put it somewhere on YouTube because I think I came across it while scrolling through the endless YouTube. But that is also a really neat tutorial to watch. And also Mark Lorenz's Bucks Till Dawn webinar went over some of the other macros that he has in his show file. And you can actually, and I believe we included a download link in the YouTube video to get a base show file from him so that you can see like the macros and stuff that are being used exactly. So I don't have one, but there are plenty of resources available.
Bud added, also great for dousing fixtures and striking fixtures.
I would not do those in a macro. I do those in queues and queue lists, but I think that just comes to preference. I don't know if you have a preference, Paul.
I think going back to, because I spent most of my time on Hog 3, which didn't have macros, so I did everything by queue list. So I think just by my nature, I do a lot of those things by queue lists.
Yeah, and then I also like the fact that the queue list can be played in the background. So the macros take up whatever I'm doing at that point in time. Like I can't go and fire a keystroke macro and do something else at the same time. Now, granted, my keystroke macros don't take that long, but if they were to be super long and take a while, I can't do something else. Whereas if it's a warm up queue list and the very first thing is strike your lamps, great. I can record these things under control can get recorded into scenes or queues. So I can just say control. Of course, all the fixtures in here are LEDs, so they don't have a lamp strike. But I could go to fixture idle if I needed to. Or if I needed to actually shut down, fixture shut down, and get them shut down that way. But I know some people do like to use them as keystroke macros. It's just not my preferred way. And then I usually have that's usually like a separate scene that's triggered via Comet Macro at the top of the day. And that can be set as a startup macro. So in my startup macro, I fire that scene to strike my lamps. And then at the end of and then there's another scene that just says shut down. And it can shut down the lamps if I need to, or douse the lamps.
I thought we answered this, John. In the macro view, in the checkbox menu, what does follow current macro mean? The same thing? I thought we answered that. Or they're two different things?
I think there's two different things. Because if I open up here at the checkbox, there's a follow. Oh, it's the same thing. It just gives you another option for it. It's the exact same button. So if I go here, follow current macros unchecked, and that's not blue, I do it, I check it, I hit apply, that's blue. So it's the exact same option, just listed two different times. Because because it's a little bit more of consistency. All the other like list type windows like this have this checkbox. So it gives you an option to also see this same thing here. Just like if I do list 10. Open. There's that follow queue option. I think if I go here, there's that follow current queue option that exists, and it just follows this button specifically. So I think it's just to keep up consistency. But yes, Paul, you're right. It's the same thing, just worded differently.
Anything else floating out there, guys?
Yeah. Anything else that I missed about macros? Tips and tricks from the road? I'm trying to think, because that's my big one is the waiting for input. is what we would get. What I've gotten asked a couple of times is like how to wait for input, and you just don't put a wait time there.
Right.
And then you just fire it again, and it picks up right where you left off.
What is an embedded palette?
An embedded palette. I've never heard that
Phrase.
term in Hog before, and I haven't heard that term or phrase. Oh no, that's fine for it to be off topic. Do you mean like a direct palette or like so we have two different types of palettes in Hog.
Reference palettes and direct palettes.
Yeah, you have reference palettes and direct palettes. So your direct palettes, you can kind of see they have a little D here, meaning they're direct. And the difference between a reference palette and direct palette is with your direct palette, it doesn't actually reference this intensity palette. So, well, reference palettes are slightly different too. That's great. But so with your direct palette, it doesn't make any connection that you're calling in a palette. So basically by me hitting at a intensity palette for 100% right now, because it has that D and it's direct, it is making it be it's the same thing as me hitting at 100 enter. There is no reference to a palette whatsoever. If I update this palette, the fixtures that were using this palette still stay at 100% because it directly entered those values. Now with what I'm going to call a normal palette, a regular palette, these are now taking into account the palette. So it's saying, instead of putting in those hard values there, it's actually saying, hey, actually, I'm getting my information from this palette. Then you have reference palettes, and reference palettes are a bit different because in here, they're actually making references to another palette that exists. So the band palette is referencing whatever the keys position palette is, and the bass position palette, and the lead electric drums position palettes. So if we were to change the keys palette from being over here, so if I was to update this a bit and go this way, record, keys, merge. So my keys palette is now there. My band palette, whatever lights were focused on the keys, the keyboardist, is now taken from that new keys position that was given. So like this one here should be the band. When I switch the band, it's referencing this keys palette rather than me having to update the band palette. So there's like, I guess technically there's three types of palettes. You have your regular palette, your direct palette, which is basically you just directly entering those values. They become hard values. And then you have a reference palette, which is a palette that can hold other palettes inside it. You can start to get paletteception.
Edward, I see your question challenging with merging show on a Hog 3. When I merge, only I get fixtures on the patch window, nothing else. Yeah, on Hog 3 did not merge patch information. It only merged fixtures over. And that's, just a limitation of Hog 3.
Yep.
You're most welcome, bud.
Of course. All right, I think hopefully, John, that helped your answer. That got you an answer. I would guess that embedded palette is probably similar to a reference palette is what you're talking about. See you, Matt. So I would think that the reference palette is what you were probably talking about, where like I said, in this band palette, it references the other palettes here. They're not hard values in this case. Awesome. I am going to talk about what's up next then a little bit more. I know I kind of do it at the beginning, and we're going to do it at the end. As per usual, though, this is going to be on YouTube sometime early next week. Got to give time for the recording to process and all that good stuff, and then our video team to actually get on it and post it onto YouTube. But it should be there. sometime next week. Next week we'll have Bridging the Hog, so networking, bring all your networking questions, or, and sorry, the survey didn't pop up last time. I forgot to check a box. It should pop up this time. Or put in your networking questions and we'll make sure they get answered. Of course, we'll have this Q&A chatting time. But HogNet, FixtureNet, networking, all those settings, we're going to go over. And then after that, we're going to do a troubleshooting and troubleshooting tips and tricks of troubleshooting. What we've seen, Paul has plenty of years also and experience to bring in here. So what we've seen, how we suggest to fix that those kind of issues that we run into, some common things that we see with Hog 4 PC, all that good stuff's going to be on July 2nd. And again, if you have any ideas that you want us to talk about, please fill out the survey. And if for some reason the survey does not pop up again, shoot an email to support@highend.com. That's a lot easier than spelling my name. And we'll get you and say, hey, here's a topic for a webinar, and we will see if they get fit in somewhere.